Good evening. Good to see you again. I'm sorry it's been so long since our last visit, since I was able to kind of entertain you a little bit. I had meant to actually sit down several different times and prepare a chance for us to kind of sit and chat, and just about every time I did, my youngest was having a really hard time. He was teething at the time, and so just about every time I would kind of sit down and get myself into a place where we could maybe chat for a few minutes, he would need some tending to. So that's why it's been so long. But I'm happy to see you again. I'm trying to think what happened on our last visit, and I think I just read a little something to you from Alice in Wonderland, actually. Before that, we had talked about what I was reading, and I've actually had a chance to get back into what I had anticipated that I was going to read this year. First, what I was just about to begin was Tolkien's Tales from the Perilous Realm. I had the Parson's Son just around the corner from our house lend me some books, and so I read those. And I've had a chance to actually kind of get back to my regular reading. We're, of course, in Lent. This is the week after the first Sunday of Lent, and usually during Lent I read largely the same stuff. So I usually start out and read kind of over the course of Lent, along with some particular scriptures and that sort of thing. I usually read Augustine's Confessions. And then because St. Patrick's Day always falls within Lent, I end up reading Morris's Life of St. Patrick on or around St. Patrick's Day. So I've started into the Confessions, and here in probably the next couple days I'll pick up the Life of St. Patrick and kind of read that. I believe this would be the third or fourth year that I've read through both of those. So I think it's the fourth. Anyway, I had just finished yesterday something I wasn't planning on reading, and that was a book on William the Conqueror. I have a series on a handful of the English monarchs, and I am very interested, particularly because of the Arthurian stuff I was reading this last year. I was particularly interested in the Norman influence on King Arthur and England as a whole. And so I picked up that book on William the Conqueror and just finished it yesterday. So I've actually had a chance to get back to some of the reading that I had been planning for this year, and that is particularly Plato's Timaeus. I had a chance to sit down and pick up Plato last night and read his, I don't know how you pronounce it, if it's Eon or Ion, but his dialogue, it was very short but very interesting. And then today I had a chance to kind of jump into the Timaeus again. I had told you that I had wanted to read the Timaeus again. I picked it up kind of on a whim, I believe, a year and a half ago or something, and read through it and was really fascinated. But of course, I mean, like most things you read for the first time, it always warrants a second reading. So I had, I think I got this for Christmas a couple years ago, actually. But this is Plato's Timaeus, the Latin translation, which is not the complete Timaeus, but also Chalcidius's commentary. So I read the Timaeus today, and then I'll get into the commentary tomorrow. But I was very interested in several of the points that Plato makes in this dialogue, and I had some of this saved here, but now I have to go back and find it. One of which, and we've talked about this before, but one of the things that he talks about is the purpose of music within the cosmos. So the Timaeus largely is an explanation of the macrocosm and microcosm. That is the cosmos as a whole, and then the microcosm being the human person, the human soul. And I remember reading this the first time and just being shocked at how intuitive this was. So let me see if I can't find this here again. I think I found it, maybe. agitation. Where is this here? Maybe I'm not going to be able to find it. Oh, here we go. Okay. So I'm not going to look for the other part. So you'll have to be satisfied with just this small reading here. But he first outlines, when he's talking first about the human person, he talks about the creator, the craftsman god, in the Latin. And he's talking about this craftsman god creating the human person, uniting soul to a human body, and saying, okay, well, you have this pure, enlightened soul that is perfectly rational. Then you unite it to a material body, and you insert the complication of all of these literal agitations, these, like when you pluck a string on a musical instrument, it vibrates, it agitates. And the same thing, when you insert a soul into a body, a human body, you get the same thing, that now you have matter that's now affected by things. And it agitates, it has sensations of pleasure and pain. And he talks about that the soul, the human person that learns to subjugate these passions and rule them justly, will have, he talks about them with the image of like the cosmos being this perfectly smooth sphere, that in the same manner, a well-ruled and moderated person will be smooth and just, and a person who's ruled by their passions, passions are rampant, and are not ordered to their reason, their life will in turn be rough and out of joint and awful, essentially. And then he goes on to say the fate of these persons, that the just one will have their their inheritance in the stars, in this state of blessedness. And the person who can't modulate their passions and their agitations, and is instead ruled by them, will become like a wild beast. And we of course see that concept in like Dante. I'm thinking of the particular ditch in, I think it's in Malabulge, where you have the twin sinners, the serpents and the humans running around, and a serpent will bite someone, and the serpent morphs into a human form, and the human form will morph into the serpent, and they're these souls of sinners that are constantly being blown about. And among one of the images is that when we allow our passions, pleasurable or painful, to rule and to subjugate our reason, our intellect, that we become like wild beasts. And so Dante uses that imagery in several places, in like the Inferno, and that's part of the imagery of what, like in the Christian tradition, we talk about vice and sin. That's what sin does to a person. The first thing it does is it darkens a person's intellect and makes you like a wild beast. And part of the dialogue in the Timaeus outlines that, a lot of animals, particularly quadrupeds, are, their bodies are like this, head is here, their chests are here, and their lower parts are, over here. And they're all on this horizontal line. And Plato talks about this idea that they're built that way because in none of those things their intellect is not ordered to be master over their passions. Animals run on instinct and that sort of thing. Whereas the human person is particularly built in such a way that their passions and then their heart, this modulating aspect of their sensibilities, is above that. And then to crown everything is their head, which is the seat of their intellect. And the whole point of that being is your base passions should be ordered towards the good as apprehended by your reason and intellect. which is very Christian. Particularly, I'm thinking, because it's the season of Lent, this was actually a really interesting thing to kind of read and then meditate on. But that's part of the purpose of Lent, is we practice giving up things that are not bad in and of themselves. This year I'm drinking some tea, but I've given up alcohol, and alcohol isn't bad. I don't struggle with overindulgence in that area. I've given up some other things, excessive sugar, stuff like that, but just these comforts that aren't bad in and of themselves, but comforts that we're used to. And in order to prepare ourselves to fight the battle of moderating our really evil passions, things we really want to do, our vices, and that sort of thing, in order to prepare to battle those things, really easy thing is to take on voluntary suffering. When you're training for when an athlete is training for a sport event, they subject themselves to voluntary pain through working out and exercise and all of that sort of thing. And that's kind of what Lent is, and that's part of the purpose of what Timaeus is talking about here. So all of that gets back to the end of music, and the end, I don't mean like the cessation of music. What I mean is the telos, the purpose of music. What is music for? What does it do? What is it for? And I remember being struck by this the first time reading the Timaeus, and I think you might be as well. So Timaeus says here, and harmony, music, i.e. modulation, being a regulated tension and having agitations that are cognate with and, as it were, akin to the circumlations of our soul, is quite beneficial for those who use the gift of the Muses wisely, and for the sake of moderation rather than pleasure. For with the help of the Muses it recalls the soul's discordant and unharmonious agitations back into attunement and ordered concord. And rhythm has been given as the remedy for a nature which is for the most part unruly, ignorant of number and limit, and devoid of grace. For the sake of moderation rather than pleasure, for with the help of the Muses it recalls the soul's discordant and unharmonious agitations back into attunement and ordered concord. I was just so struck by that's what music is for. Music is for the ordering of our base passions to our intellect, to the good. And it makes you think how much of our popular music is, quite frankly, just base innuendo. And I'm curious, I'm actually not terribly curious. I think I have a pretty good idea. If someone were to ask Plato, what would happen to a society in which a big use of music, a large way in which they use their music, is not in order to rightly order and modulate base passions in the human person, but in order to express them freely? I think he would say, perhaps without hesitation, that society would quickly deteriorate and implode. So all of that to say, be careful with what you listen to, and until next time, I look forward to seeing you next, and have a good evening.